Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? It was good. We are so happy to see the full room. Very exciting. Many companies try to make some sort of investment into modern analytics tools. Very few succeed. As customers are trying to go through this journey, they face a number of concerns and things they care about, such as one version of truth, successful collaboration, tools are easy to learn, and data is being protected, and trying to get insights in the timely manner to actually make decisions. In this session today, we will address those concerns, and we'll go into a deep demo how Excel, Power BI, and Office 365 help to solve those. My name is Jana. I am with Excel marketing team, and I have a wonderful team with me here as well to present to you. We have Miguel from the Power BI team, Olive from Excel marketing, Excel engineering team, and Ken, our honored Excel MVP. I'll start with a short story back in the history to help you understand how we see the trends. So the story began in 1440. Does anyone know what happened in this year? Some of you might have heard the story before. And I only have one prize just for this question. Or we can save it for later if nobody gets that. So any guesses? Nobody knows? Yes, who was the first one? You, somebody can try to catch. Exactly, the printing press was invented in 1440, arguably around this year. It's when the, before that, books were very few and very expensive. What printing press did is democratized literacy. But it's only till the 17th century when the literacy rate really rose because the Industrial Revolution kicked in, and it was very critical to be literate to be successful. Big data is really bringing the digital age and making the data very important and making data a new literacy. We are today at the digital transformation, and it's really what's bringing up the new industrial revolution. We are at the age of the big data today, and it's very important for companies to acquire data culture to be successful. And it's not only all the companies that try to make these investments. There's a lot of research that proves that's to be really the trend. And what analysts say is that 18% of the companies who make successful investments into the modern analytics tools experience 18% higher gross margin rates. And another stat is very interesting is that by the year 2020, about 80% of the companies will be using some sort of modern analytics tools. So the trends are there. There's definitely customers who want to make better and faster decisions using some sort of modern analytics tools today. With our deep demos of the joint solutions between Excel, Power BI, and Office 365, we will show you now how we can help you get there. And as we go through this journey, I will start with the day in the life of the modern analyst, and I will hand it off to Olive to walk you through this journey.
Sorry about that. Hi, yeah, my name is Olive Hubel. I only have a couple of slides just to level set what I'm about to demo. We're going to be pretty heavy demo. Basically, for the next 40 minutes will be all demos. And so what we're going to talk about is really how data flows through an enterprise. And we're going to take two different roles there. We're going to do the end user. So I'll start as an end user, how I create content and how I want to share that content and how I can consume the content. And then Miguel will go in as a data modeler, how we actually build all that in the back end and how easy that was for him. And then at the end, we'll actually do a quick tips and tricks type of thing. And Ken will come in and show you some really cool stuff that you can actually do with those tools as well. So me and Miguel will really show you just the flow as a total, right? And so basically what the flow is of our life cycle of data through an enterprise is somewhere you get your data or you create your data, you start analyzing this data, you want to visualize it, get some insights into it, and then you want to start publishing or sharing that data with others, and then you want to start collaborating, chatting about the data, sharing, or talking about what you've discovered, and then you want to just start all over again, right? It's just a start of another data set, and you keep going around and around that way. Now, we have a lot of tools that make that very easy. And what we're going to talk about today is how Office 365 actually brings all those different tools together and how you can use Office 365 throughout your enterprise to actually do those things. We're going to start in Excel, where it's a familiar place to analyze your data, see if your data is clean, get some insights in your data, discover what it is you're trying to share. Then we're going to go into Power BI, and in Power BI, you create the reports and the visualizations that you actually want to share with the full enterprise. And then we loop back into 365, where you want to analyze it again in Office 365 or in Excel, and that way you just keep looping around. And so that's basically what we're going to demo today. So with that, let's just go straight into the first demo. And then after all the demos, I'll have a slide that brings it together again so you can see what it is we did. Because I think we're going to go really fast through everything. Like I said, I'm going to play the end user. And we wanted to make it really easy for an end user to just work in the enterprise, create stuff, and then consume that. And because of that, we used Teams. And so here we're in Office 365 Teams. And you can see I have a couple of teams here. I'm not going to go through all the different teams, but I have a sales team. So in this case, I'm a salesperson, and so I want to collaborate with my salespeople. You see I'm in a general one, and we have a couple of discussions going on here. I can read that I've been @mentioned, for example, so I can quickly see that. But somebody also here mentioned an Excel file. So they were actually like talking about something they wanted to share with me. So I can click on there, and what it does is it actually opens this tab here right on top, and it opens the Excel file directly in Excel online, embedded inside of Teams. So I didn't even switch applications or anything. I'm just in where I normally have my conversations, and I can just start looking at this. Of course, I can click on here and say I want to edit this in online, but I can also edit it in the rich client. I already have the file open, so if I open it here, you can see, I can do everything I want to do. You see Miguel's actually clicking through there. You see the blue box moving around. So we're collaborating in real time on this data sheet. I can actually see that he has comments in here as well. And this is our new modern comments. So you can now @mention people directly in the grid. And they're going to get an email saying like, somebody or Miguel really wants you to look at this, click here, and you open the Excel file right away, and I can then @mention him back. And so we can actually have a conversation, because most likely, he and I don't live in the same time zone. We actually happen to live really close to each other, but let's say we don't live in the same time zone. We don't actually real-time collab, even though the tool right now shows real-time collab, right? A lot of times it's a couple of hours later. And so that's a really powerful way to be able to do that. Now I'll go back to Teams. The other thing I have in here is forms, so I can actually capture data from people. Later you'll see the data that we're capturing here in this form, where I can do some ratings. That Miguel will actually use that as one of the data sources in his full data model. Now, because I'm a salesperson, I have this monthly channel here. In my monthly reports, they're asking me to create an Excel file every month with some of my sales data. So all I have to do is click on Files, and from whatever country I am, I'll just drag my file in here, or I can click on this file and just edit the file and update my sales numbers. Now you'll see in here in the bottom that somebody was funny. They put an MP3 and an MP4 in just to mess with Miguel later when he's creating his data model and he has to clean all this stuff. So he's going to show you how he does that. But me as a salesperson, all I have to know is that I drag my file in here, and then I can click on this global sales report, and I'm just going to see the Power BI report directly embedded inside of Teams again. And this actually has everything from those Excel files and a whole host of other data sources. But as an end user, that's all I had to know, right? So I can consume this data right here. I can actually click on that I want to open this directly in the browser as well. So if you want to go all the way open, I can now click through this one. I can drill down. I can do all the beautiful things that you can do in Power BI. The last thing I wanted to show is an end user what I can do here, because I talked about how this keeps going around, right? I can actually click on the little buttons here and say, analyze this in Excel. And so it will open Excel for me, and it will instantly create a connection and a pivot table based on this data. And so I now get clean data back. I threw some data in an Excel file in a folder that was kind of dirty. And then Miguel took that, cleaned it up, published it out, I consumed it as a report, and now I'm consuming that data model directly inside of Excel, and I can just click around here and add this to my table. Now, this is still single source of truth, because I can't see the data model. I'm just consuming the data model from the cloud, so as soon as he's going to make changes to the data model, it will update in my file here. So I only see clean data that I'm allowed to see, which is a really nice way of working with your data. Now I can just collaborate on this with others, right? So that's how we keep making that circle. So with that, let's switch over to how you actually build this.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Miguel. So let me show you a little bit what that looks like on the creator slash data modeler slash business analyst side of things. Usually this person is the same person that is doing the data modeling and the visualizations. It could be separate people, and that's why the same collaboration features that Olaf showed, we can actually use in to basically collaborate between the people that are building these reports. So same as before, we have a team here that is for the data team. So this is where we're going to keep the Excel file that is going to do all of this analysis. So we're going to go and use Power Query to get the files in, clean up the funny people that decided to put some files there, and model that result with measures, with other things, so we can publish back into Power BI. So here I am looking at the same folder in the sales team, and I'm going to switch to Excel now. So regular Excel file that between the data people or the data team we are working on. So we have regular tables, regular graphs. But if you see here in the data tab, we have the NuGet data experience. This is built on top of Power Query. Power Query is the low-code, no-code experience to tap into any data source, mash all that up, and import it into a data modeling space, which in this case is Power Pivot. It's important, and that's most of what I'm going to show because I want Ken to show kind of the beauty of Power Query, is that the language and the technology and the engine that works in Excel is the same one that works in Power BI. So if you're concerned about learning the M language, which is the Power Query one, or DAX, which is the Power Pivot one, you can actually learn once and use it in both sides. So I'll give you a proof of that, which is the first time we're going to try that. So hopefully that's going to go. So let me go to get data. You can see all the data sources that we have here. From other sources, we have 80 plus, I want to say. It's getting close to 100 plus. What I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the Power Query editor so you can see what I already built here. So the table that we want to show, or the query that we want to show, is the one here. You can see the steps to the right. This is literally buttons or several transformations that I'm doing, either clicking the buttons on the ribbon or writing the actual M code. These are all saved for a reason, which is, if you think about when you, I don't know, you want to do popcorn in the microwave and you need to remember the exact time if you're using the same brand and the same microwave, this is exactly it. There's no need for you to refresh or rewrite everything again. You save it here. If those things change, you're going to come back and change it here. So let's go to the source. You're going to see that it's a OneDrive file, SharePoint, whatever you want to name it. And you can see all the files here. Because I can actually extract the name of the file and the extension directly from SharePoint, I can just go and filter the ones that I want, which in this case are going to be the Excel files. Like that step, you have all the steps saved here. So I'm filtering rows, removing columns that I don't like. I'm expanding a table, so on and so forth.
There's some SharePoint people in the room. I used to work in the SharePoint team, and so my natural way of working with this is I would write the URL to the site / the document library that I wanted to get. That actually doesn't work. You have to write the top level site, and then you go into filters here, and you actually see all the libraries and folders directly in there. And so in Power Query is where you actually do the filtering of the folders or the document libraries or the subsites and stuff like that, which is actually really cool because now you can get documents from multiple document libraries and merge them together, which is a sweet thing to do.
Exactly, and the first time you do that, it's basically going to ask you to sign in. Power Query knows or expose the type of data source that you're trying to tap into. If it's authenticated one like Office 365, it just gives you a button, pop-up window in an iframe, you log in into your Office 365 account, and you're good to go. Okay, so let me do that experiment now. I'm going to go to the advanced editor. This is the actual M code. So this is the M language. Not very friendly, especially if you're not familiar with it. I'm going to copy all of it, and then I'm going to go to Power BI. I'm going to open the same query editor, edit queries. I already have the query here, but I'm going to do the advanced editor. Delete everything, paste it again, and I'm going to click Done. Because I'm already logged in into the source, it's not asking me to sign in, but you can see that you have the same steps here, so the same look and feel. You're getting the exact same result. So if you wanted to learn that here, you would actually, if you wanted to learn M, you could use it both in Excel and Power BI, and that gives you an advantage of saving time and familiarity. The same thing works with the modeling side of things. So now in this Excel file, I'm going to go back. Every time in Power, sorry, I should have shown that. Let me go back to the query editor. Every time that you have queries here, and you can see that I have more than just that folder, we can close and load. What that is doing is that's taking the data model after the queries and putting it in Power Pivot. Again, the same analysis services engine that you see in SQL Server, it's within Excel and it's in Power BI. So it's super fast, compressed, so on and so forth.
And for Excel, the reason you want to load to the data model is because that's how you get over your 1,000,000 rows. So if you would load everything to the grid, if you do Power Query and you have more than 1,000,000 rows, Excel would start slowing down a lot. If you load it into the data model and not to the grid, I do demos with 8 million, 10 million, whatever. Like it depends on your RAM. Sorry?
We did 1 trillion rows.
Trillion, there you go.
As long as you have the machine that can support that.
Yeah. So it really is limited by the hardware at that point. Look at the data model as a little database inside of Excel. So that's the way how you do big data.
So this is a result of that margin query that I mentioned before. So you can see the same data here. What we're doing in Power Pivot is we are creating measures. So you can see the actual DAX code up here. So let me show you. Let me do a little bit of zoom there. So that's DAX, which sounds very scary. At the same time, it's not. It's very similar to Excel. It is a little bit different in the way that it's dynamic. It's going to carry filters. It's going to allow you to create those interactive reports when you have a calculation and you cross-filter, and then the number is calculated again. So let me do the opposite, which is in Power BI, I created a measure. There it is. So here's our measure. I'm going to copy the DAX code. I'm going to bring it back here, and I'm going to paste it on the bar. Pro tip, like you were saying before, there's only one small difference between the Excel Power Pivot experience and Power BI, which is 2 dots equal. So I'm going to click Enter, and then that measure is going to be there available when I publish the report, the same way that it would have been in Power BI. In this particular case, is the average across the product category for COGS.
And a measure being super cool because you use them in pivot tables, right? And so before you would have to write a whole bunch of lookups because you haven't shown that here yet, but you can make relationships between tables. And so if you do measures, you drop them in your pivot table. You don't have to write all the VLOOKUPs and actually get there. This is one formula you write one time and then using your pivot, and it will slice and dice any way you like, which is super cool.
Live poll. How many people have used Access before? I'm old. Okay. Well, this view should look familiar, which is the table view, the one that you would drag and drop a relationship. You get the same here where you have different tables that can come from different data sources like we did before. All of that is going to be here. So once you're happy with your data model, that's where the magic happens, which is we come here, and directly from Excel, you can publish to the Power BI service. Remember, this is all Office 365. It's all connected, so it's going to, if it shows, it's going to show all of your workspaces. In this particular case, because we're still working on the data model, we're going to publish to the data team workspace. We're going to do some more collaboration, and then when we're ready, we want to publish that back.
And sorry, there's a couple of really cool reasons why we actually made the data model inside of Excel. So if you go back to the Excel file for a second, if you're in the file, you can actually go to the history.
Oh, yes.
Top. Yep. So if you go there, you can go to View History, and you can now actually automatically see the history of this Excel file. Because it's stored in Office 365, you now have version control over your data model. So what Miguel is doing is he's publishing the data model to Power BI, but the original source will stay in Excel. So anytime you make a change to this, the data model inside of Excel, Power BI will pick it up within 2 hours, which is a different sync than your actual data refresh. Right? Power BI will also do a data refresh, and it can do those scheduled and stuff.
That's important.
And it
you
will
can
go
force
through
it, or will automatically refresh because it's a file that lives in OneDrive. Whatever changes you make here, those will be picked up with Power BI.
And so data refresh being different than data model update. So if you make changes to this file, but now you can actually, if somebody messed with it, you can actually roll back, and Power BI will then pick up on it, and now you have that other version of your data model, which I think is really cool to actually have that control over your data model.
And now let's do the last part, which is kind of the most fun, at least for me, which is the data set. It's already here. You can author this in several ways. The easiest way, because we're publishing from Excel, is going into the data set and creating a report on top of that. I could start dragging and dropping and doing all of that. Let me show you the cool stuff, which is if I double click anywhere here, I can just go and say year to date, and it's going to scan the model for the fields that actually match that. So let me do it again so I can find it. Year to date revenue maybe, and then I'm going to say over time. Time. And there you go. You have a bridge. If you don't like it, You can switch it with the different visuals that we have, so on and so forth. If there's an increase, for example, I can actually go and right-click on that and ask Power BI to analyze or show me the distribution of the data behind it. So the same concept that we have in Excel, which is you can get ideas or distributions or what is behind your data. Find me a forecast, find me an outlier. Anything that is messing up or explaining why something is happening with your data, you can actually come here and ask Power BI to do it or Excel to do it. If you like what you see, you can always bring this visualization back into your dashboard. Then you can just move this around, and that's how you start building your report. This is what it looks like on a final version, which is what Olaf searched. Once you have this ready, you can publish back again either as an app. So it's a container of things in Power BI that people can access. You can push it back to users. You can keep the security, the row-level security if you want, built into the model. You can do a lot of things based on that.
A couple slides. So I have 2 slides. No, 1 slide. I just wanted to quickly highlight what it was we actually demoed before Ken is going to go in and show some real cool Power Query stuff and what you can do and how to clean your data and all those things. So really what we did is in the beginning, as an end user, I was working in that group. I was sharing files together. I was collaborating, and we were just working in Excel. And then what Miguel did was the next step. He was connecting to that and augmenting that data with other data sources and really building that model, cleaning it up, making sure all the steps are automated. And he only had to do that once, right? Because after the sales guys could just keep dropping as many files they want in there. Every time we run the refresh of data, it will apply all those steps to you automatically again. And we then published it to the cloud, and so the data model nicely lives in the cloud, so everybody can consume it. The salespeople could consume it from their mobile phone. They could consume it directly, wherever they are. I was using Excel, for example, and Miguel was using Power BI desktop to actually build the visualizations. Because one of the things we didn't go in, but you can open Power BI desktop and actually now connect to the cloud model, so it's a live connection. And so in Power BI desktop, you can't change the data model at that point because the data model is still controlled by Excel. And it actually then nicely grays that out. So there's a lot of nice tools that you can use together. So with that, let's switch over to some really cool Power Query stuff.
So I get the fun part of actually building the data model and playing around with some of this stuff. And what I'm going to start with is all of the data files that we have are actually stored in SharePoint. But the key thing that I want you to recognize about this is, number one, it doesn't matter if I do this in Excel or Power BI. It's the same steps for the same tool, which is great. And the second thing is that I also have connectors, if I can just make sure that my mouse is working here.
Can everybody hear Mike?
Am I out?
Yeah? Okay.
I also have connectors in here that I can actually connect to local folders as well. So if the data is stored locally, I can actually connect to that too. So we have a ton of different connectors. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab this site URL here, and I'm going to go and collect my data from a SharePoint folder. Show you what I need to go through to walk through and clean up this data here to build some of the stuff we saw earlier here. So this connects me to a preview window that shows me all of the different data that's in the root of this site. I'm going to go to transform data, and we're going to pick up into Power Query. Now I have a massive list of every single file that's in the top level of that site, which is obviously way too much stuff. I'm going to go over to the little folder here, and I'm going to search down for the variants folder, which is the one I want. There it is. I can now shrink down the list nicely so that I have just those particular files. Now, right now, every file that's in this folder is an Excel file. It's all got an XLSX extension. But I work with these guys, and I've already seen that some joker likes to throw MP4 files and stuff like that. I'm also not convinced that one of them won't get their caps lock key stuck on when they start sending files through this. Power Query is case sensitive. So I'm going to future-proof this a little bit just to make sure they can't play any games with me. I'm going to transform this to lowercase. Put on a filter on this one. Try not to sound like a spaceship. We'll go into a text filter. Now, ideally, what I really want is I want just Excel files. But unfortunately, if I uncheck the select all box, it checks Excel files. If I check Excel, it checks select all again. So I've got to be a little bit more tricky with this. I'm going to go to text files, and we're going to see this. We'll set up a manual filter on this one. So we'll say it's XLSX, all lowercase. I'm also going to go to advanced. I'm going to go to make sure that the file name does not begin with the tilde icon, and that way if somebody needs a temp file in this folder, it's not going to end up messing up the result. So we'll say OK, and now I don't have to worry about any MP4s or any files that have been put in, whether they're temp files or anything else. Now, one of the characteristics in this list is name. This is the file something else in my case, which is this so we're going to rename this column here. And because my data I already know from poking around and it doesn't have the country inside each file, I want to preserve that. So I'm going to right click on this guy here, replace values. I'm going to replace the .xlsx with nothing. To transform this based on the file name to get me to country. I'm going to come back and use that a little bit later. I'm going to go and change the name of this query to margin. There. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to take every one of these Excel files and I'm going to combine them together into one big long list so I can feed into a data model. Before Power Query, this was a really tedious manual operation. Now, I just click one button and it comes up and it says, just wait a second, let me take a preview of what's going on here. It'll give me a nice little list here. This is which file would you like to use to base your sample on. First file. And it says, all right, well, I've noticed that when I look through the list of files here, that they have worksheets in them. Now, they don't have any tables. Nobody's actually gone in and put a structure inside this. And that's actually really kind of cool because this also works with those classic XLS files that still get picked up from some big intelligence systems as well. So I can go and say, sheet one. Give me a little preview here. Ooh, that did was nasty. All right, no big deal. We'll say, okay. Now what's going to happen is it's going to run through a little bit of a process here, and all of a sudden there's going to be an explosion of some more queries and stuff on the left-hand side. So here we go. A little bit of patience, please. I'll show you. Here you go. Boom. Got some stuff. Hold on. What happened? And see that? I now have a beautiful long list where I have every single file on the bottom. The data still kind of. So when I look here, I can see that I've got, if I scroll around in this thing, I can see that I've got some header rows down around row 47. That's not ideal. The data's kind of gross. I want to do a little bit more. So I'm just going to take one step to the next one later. But I'm going to come back to this transform sample. Now the transform sample file is a very special file when we go through this process. If I scroll down, you'll notice that it stops pretty quick. We only get to 46 rows. This is every row in that first file of data. And this is the one that allows me to go back and say, well, hey, this is the pattern. I think that every file that's in this folder uses the same structure. So I can use this to clean up the data to build a template that can be applied to every file. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through this. I'm just going to make this a little bit wider so I can see my information. I can see that I've got some audio head.
It's easy to do. Whoa, that was a big jump. We're going to go to fill, and we're going to choose fill down. Did the mic just turn on? Is that what happened? Wow. All right, so, you know, did anybody have challenges hearing me? I mean, I got a pretty big voice. It's a big room. I'm feeling pretty good about this actually now. All right, so we filled down. That's definitely louder. We filled down, and now I can see that I've got all of these individual data points are associated with the individual rows, and that's pretty cool, except that when I look down this data here, I can see that I actually have multiple columns of data all stuffed into one column, and they seem to be delimited by this dash. It looks like I've got a category on the left and a product on the right. So not a big deal though either. With Power Query, we can right click on this guy here, and I can go and say split column, and I can split this by a delimiter. And Power Query is pretty smart. It comes back and says this is a custom delimiter, and it's picked up a custom delimiter of a dash. And it's done a pretty good job, but it's not perfect, because the delimiter that I actually want here is not dash, it's space dash space. So you know what, I'm just going to fix it, space dash space. And I love this because when you're working with data, I can use any number of characters. I can put an entire paragraph of text in here if I want to. And there are occasions when I've been building real world solutions where I've had to do that. So this is good. Just in case I have a hyphenated product, I'm going to go with leftmost so I don't oversplit this, and we'll say okay. And there we go, we've got two new columns there. Looks like row 1 has a few pieces on it that are headers, so I'll promote that to headers. And at that point, I'm going to go and get my target, my actual, my variance, and I can see that my first column here looks like it's going to be my category, and my second column here is going to be my product. There we are. And now I've got a few rows here that have null values going through them, so I'm just going to get rid of those. Something that's important to recognize about Power Query, the original data file is still unchanged. This is just steps being applied to the process as it comes in, so I'm not compromising the original file structure at all. Now, the data looks pretty good, except that I've got a bit of a problem. When I was working with Olaf and whatnot on this data set, he said, I want a column that says target revenue, target cost of goods sold, actual revenue, actual cost of goods sold, and I don't have that here. So in order to make that, I kind of need to actually spin the information from column 3 and the headers here together. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to start by taking all of this data, and I need to unwind it so that I have a single column of values and a column that actually tells me which one of these items is here. So I'm going to go and right-click on these guys here and say unpivot other columns. And just like that, it unwinds the entire data set. And I can tell that you guys are so impressed, and you can do this no problem whatsoever at home, right? This is a huge thing, right? Boom, one click, done. All right, at any rate, since that didn't impress you, let's keep moving on. We'll go and we'll grab target here, and I'm going to grab my revenue, and then I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to say merge columns, and we'll merge these with a specific separator. I'm going to go and use a space to put it together. Now, I selected the attribute first and column 3 second, so it actually flips the order and puts them together nicely with target revenue and my revenue variance. And that's awesome, except that I need these guys as my column headers. So now I'm going to go to transform, pivot column, and I'm going to pivot the category as my headers. Now that's going to pick that up right away here. And I'm going to choose to use the value. So we're going to say OK, and it's now going to flip those column headers so they come across the top, and we've pivoted the data. Yes, that's better. That's what we were looking for. All right. So now, if you're a pivot table pro, one of the things you don't need in a data set is you don't need your variance, because you can create that on the fly using a formula. So this data doesn't really need to be stored in the data model because I can rebuild that on the fly. So I'm going to grab the variance columns here. There we are. And I'm going to just get rid of those because don't need them. I believe in the spec that I was given, we need to have this one here. Target cost of sales should actually be called list price. And our actual cost of goods sold is just supposed to be referred to as COGS. And we also wanted another column that showed the percent of revenue, which was the actual revenue, and the list price. And we'll go to add column, standard, percent of. And this will create us a percent of column that we can rename to percent of list price. All of those transformations from a stack of Excel files, except I'm just using one Excel file. So how well did that work for me? Well, you know what? Let's go back and let's check out the margin page and see what we got. Boom, just like that. It's applied to every single file. Okay, you're impressed. All right, we'll keep going. All right, so one thing that's missing though, what's missing is my country, because if I actually go back and I look at the transform sample file, there's no information in here anywhere that said country. But fortunately, every one of those files was saved with that country file name that I made beforehand. So I'm going to come back to margin. One of the pieces that happens as we work through this, we had our source, we filtered the rows, converted to lowercase, we filtered the rows again, renamed some things, replaced the values, went through all these steps. And then when I tried to do the combination, Power Query added a few more steps to this particular query. I didn't code all these myself. I just clicked it with a button and it happened. It filtered out hidden files to make sure those weren't going to get pulled into this particular data set. And then it did this thing called invoke custom function. And what that does is it actually adds a new column to the end of the data set that wasn't there before. And if I click in the white space here, you can see the results of it. This is the transformed file that I actually used as my sample. And the next row is the transforms file that I didn't use as my sample, but it's the same pattern that's been applied to that file. And this just happens automatically for you. The next step, it said remove other columns 1. I can replicate this very easily by right-clicking and just saying remove other columns, but Power Query did it for me. What it's done though is it's removed every column except for this guy, and then it said, I want you to expand all the columns. The problem is, I lost a column that's pretty important to me. I lost my country. So I'm going to click this little gear icon here. And anywhere you see a gear icon in Power Query, it will take you back into the configuration steps for that particular step. So I can now go and say, I don't want you to remove country. Let's put this one back in. And just like that, we're going to get our previews refresh, or preview is going to refresh here for us. And once that's happened, there we are. Our country is back in place. And now when I click on the next step for expanded, I have my country name associated with every piece of data from every one of those individual files. Okay, so, yes, woo, is right. Okay, so now one of the things you should always do before you load your data out is you should set your data types. This is one thing that, that I know it causes a little bit of confusion for people as they say, well, how do I format these numbers and get decimal place on? Particularly when you're dealing with accountants, they really love decimal places and commas and things like that. One key thing that we have to get used to in Power Query is this is about data types. This is not about formatting. Formatting is done in Excel worksheets. Formatting is done in Power BI visuals, but it's not done in here. But the data types do need to be set. So I'm going to grab this, right-click. We're going to change the type of these 3 columns to text. And I'm going to come over here once that one's done, and I'm going to do the next columns along the way here. It takes a little while because it does need to run its previews on some of these things to make sure that everything's working right. So there we go. We're going to roll over here and we'll set all these guys up. I'm just going to set them to decimal numbers. So, on the right one, there we are. We'll go to decimal number. We'll let this one apply as well. And while I'm here, I'd kind of like to do a little bit more with this. I'd like to be able to build a quick data model out of this too, but the thing is that when you want to build a data model, you actually need dimensional tables. So one of my dimensions might be country. But in order to build a proper data model table, I have to have a one-to-many relationship. I've obviously got lots of countries repeating in here many times. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to build another query off of this one. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to choose Reference. And this creates a new query called Margin 2. This guy here, I'm going to call him Country, and I'm just going to wait for it to actually do the refresh of the preview here. And I'm going to show you how we can actually use a previous query to actually spin off another dimension very quickly. I just have to wait for the preview to actually do its load. There it is. Right-click, remove other columns. It'll get rid of all of the other columns for me. This again takes a little while to load. Right-click, remove duplicates. And this will actually distill it down to a nice, concise list of all of my individual countries that I'm working with. And I can even go and get one more dimension that I'm going to use for my model as well. We'll say reference. This one here is going to be for my products themselves. So I'll call the table products. I'm going to grab category and product. Right-click, remove other columns. And once this one's done, I'm going to remove duplicates on the product field. And as soon as this is done, I've got all the tables I need to create my nice little dimensional model. And if I take a look at the relationship that I've created between my queries, it looks like this. So I can actually even see a picture of how these queries flow together. Okay, so this is kind of a nice little thing that got added about a year ago to the product, which is great. Final thing I'm going to do with this now is I'm going to go and say home, close, and load to, and I'm going to load every one of these guys into the data model. Now, at this point, it's a key thing to recognize here is that it doesn't matter how many rows I have as long as I have enough memory and the system can handle it. This could be 1 million rows loading into the data model. It could be a trillion rows. It could be whatever I want in my fact tables. It will load into the inside of this, and I can actually completely surpass Excel's 1 million row limit, which is fantastic. I've just got to wait for the load to happen here. And as soon as it does, I'll show you how we can quickly pull together a data model and build a pivot table out of it. It just takes a little bit of time to actually go through and do it. And of course, as you go through and do these things, if you're working with Power BI, you can schedule the refresh to happen. If you're working with Excel for the desktop version, you click your refresh. Depending on how big the data set is, you might do something for a little time, but most of the time it's not too bad for performance. Depends if your data set gets really big. Let's go and jump into our Power Pivot window. Here it is. I'm going to take my little diagram view, and I've got my margin table right over here with all the different columns that I had in it. I'm going to go and link my product to my product. I'm going to link my country to my country. It's about as much work as I have to do for this data model. I'm now going to drop back to Excel, and I'm going to create a new worksheet over here. Thank you. We'll say Insert, Pivot Table. It's going to pull from the data model because I didn't have a data range selected. We'll say OK. I'll just get rid of this guy right here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you know what, let's put our category and our product on our rows, and let's go and grab our margin, and we'll throw our target revenue and put our actual revenue just above that. And then maybe from country, we'll right-click on it, and we'll say, you know what, let's go and add this as a slicer. And right now, just like that, from a whole bunch of text files or a whole bunch of Excel files stored on SharePoint, I can now go through and start clicking through and seeing exactly what happens. And when somebody adds a new Excel file to the folder, I just hit the Data Refresh All button, and it's going to go through the process of refreshing all of the data and updating the pivot table when it's done. And that is pretty much the long and short of it, really. Cheers. I think I'm going to hand it back to Jana here to close off.
Thank you. In this very brief demo, hopefully you have seen how powerful but also magical, I think I can use this word here in Orlando, Excel, Power BI, and Office 365 can be analytics tools to help you make better decisions. So as you have seen, some customers are concerned how we use them together, but you have seen that both products have common foundation. They are easy to learn. They are familiar. you've seen how you can protect your data and make it secure. We've covered that slide. As customers go through this journey and adopting our tools, we still hear a bunch of concerns. And let us try to debunk those and address really quickly as we close. So we hear that everyone will have their own files and data. And what can we do about it? Anyone?
Sorry?
Everyone will have their own files and data.
Yeah, so this one goes to that classic story of people just emailing documents around, and you save it as V1, V1, 2, V1, 3, V1 final, 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 stuff like that, right? And it's just not needed. That has been solved a really long time ago with Office 365, where you just hit share, like I showed earlier. There's a share button right in Excel. If you do that, people get a URL and a link to the document. You have one version of the truth. Office 365 will automatically do version control for you on the document, so you can roll back. So there really is no need to email a copy of the document around. You just want to work together on that one document. So I think that is really solved by that.
And if you're getting to the level, like the volumes of data we were talking about before, emailing might not be an option, like a shared folder, like no need anymore.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other option too is, when you're actually, if you have your Excel workbook, you have the option to publish to Power BI and make the Power BI model, but you can also push your Excel workbook to Power BI and actually share the Excel workbook in Excel Online through Power BI as well. So you still have control of that one version of the truth without having to email the workbook to everybody else, which is great.
Thank you so much. We also hear that our customers are not ready to move to the cloud for security concerns.
Yeah, there I normally tell people, go to security.microsoft.com, see everything that we're doing there. I mean, we're super secure in our data centers, right? There's a really big story. I'm definitely not a security expert, but we have the experts at Microsoft that can talk about what we do to protect our cloud, how we protect cloud for the government, for example, for the finance industry. Like, there's a lot of different things that we do to make sure we're compliant at every level.
That's actually true. So just to name a few, all the compliance certifications that we have, HIPAA, the data centers that we have locally in China, Europe, which are basically managed by third parties to comply with the local laws. So all of the Office 365/Azure/Cloud and Enterprise products, they're all compliant because they all live at the same place, and you need to be aware of that.
Yep.
We also hear that reports won't scale using Excel and Power BI. Is that true?
Oh, I already talked about
I believe so.
hundreds of millions of rows, so clearly that isn't. Yeah, I think Ken's demo already showed how to get over that limit.
And the last one, it's really hard to learn the new tools.
That's what I actually wanted to not only, I would call it new, but you have the experience that you show, which is low code, no code. So you have to learn to push a button or learn what you're doing with the actual button. And if you actually want to go deep and learn the language behind it, not only you're learning something new that you can use in Excel, but you can use it in Power BI. And actually, Power Query is extending to all of the Microsoft tools that work with some sort of data. So Power Apps, Flow, even SQL Server is going to have its own Power Query editor. So if you learn that one, you're going to be actually in a pretty good place.
Well, and on top of that, like, I mean, Ken showed some really complex ways of doing it, right? Like, he's the expert, so he can go super deep in some really cool tricks. If you don't know everything that he knows, we actually didn't demo it today, but if you go into Power Query, there's a button, column from example, and you literally just write what it is you want. And so it's Excel flash fill on steroids. It will just figure out what it just was that you wrote down, like, did you make a calculation, or did you split some columns somewhere? Did you combine some columns together? And it will just do it for you. On top of that, it will actually show you the formula of what it did, so you can change the formula a little bit later, yeah, so you can learn it. So it's super easy to get started for people. Just literally say, hey, here's a new column, write the answer that you wanted, and we'll figure out how to get the answer.
Thank you so much. And with that, here are some few resources we want to leave behind with you. They will be downloadable with the recording, with the session. Stay connected with us through social, on the tech community. Send us your feedback through the user voice. And there's
the documents are downloadable, so you guys can download the PowerPoint so you can click on the URLs.
Absolutely, download and read the documents. The URLs go so long now, so there was no point actually having them there. There are a few more sessions on Excel happening through the end of this week. Something's really cool is happening on Friday. We'll have deep sessions on dynamic arrays, which we just introduced in Excel. So definitely go to the new calculations session and the deep advanced analytics session. So it should be really fun to go. And we hope you had a magical session with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.